This semester we can't use the equipment that we have at Pratt with like nice lights and a good camera. You have to kind of do your headshot at home for now, but I can give you some tips. And at first I think it's best to shoot your portraits with borrow some kind of DSL camera, or if you have one, that's one thing that will really improve it instead of just using a phone, but maybe with some phones you can also do that. Now, usually headshots are used by actors, used for auditions, because obviously you need to know what they look like. For graphic designers, I don't think it's that important, but there's still a lot of places where you need the headshots. So in applications, you don't really attach a headshot. I think it's actually advisably not a good idea to do it. But you need it, for example, on your LinkedIn profile, instead of just having an empty avatar, which looks like not a complete profile. I think it's good to have a good headshots, and you'd be surprised how some people have really, really bad headshots, and it's just, I think you're selling yourself cheap there. It's a good opportunity to show off something really cool. You also need it on your website in sort of an about section. You don't have to, but I think it's also a good opportunity to have it. And this is mine. You don't need it, like I said, on a resume anymore. Obviously, HR departments don't require headshots to be sent in because you're going to be biased already by your photo. So I don't know if it's a good idea if you want to go to, like, the focus should be on your work and your resume. My technique here is, because I'm not a good photographer, I take 100 photos and then I just hope that one turns out good. But if you take 100 photos, you shouldn't have like 100 in the same post. Like, you really need to change a lot to actually, maybe you're lucky to hit one. But there are other people obviously that know what they're doing, and I looked a little bit around what I could find, and I worked with a couple photographers, and here's also what they told me as advice for you. So one thing that I think is really important is a 50mm lens. It's more natural, because on higher lenses especially, sort of, you get this fisheye look where your face becomes like a bubble. Another thing that came up was, like, the best lighting you can get is in front of a big window, because you get sort of a soft lighting. If you have strong lights in your face, you're gonna create shadows, and it's gonna cast weird shapes that you might not pay attention to, and all of a sudden you have a very, very, like, rings under your eyes like me, or really strong chin, or something like that. You can work with that effect, but just be very aware of the shadows. Or you could find a friend who's a photographer who needs a business card and ask them to take your pictures, because they know what they're doing. They're trained to do this. So yeah, so here's the difference between the 50mm lens and what I'm filming right now. I think is higher because I'm further away. But a headshot is usually the head up. It's not like a whole body. So this would, like what you're seeing of me right now, would be probably too much of posting on a regular profile picture. You want to think about what you can have as a backdrop. In school we used like very plain ones. These are all ones from school. I think like Kim in the bottom left there's a little bit more of too much of a shadow behind her. That would be like one point I would Photoshop out and retouching it a little bit later. But everyone else sort of like kind of came out well with like how they looked with the light. And my technique was take 100 pictures and find one that looked out okay. Now this is by my friend Larry Berko. He's a professional photographer. He chooses a lot of backgrounds. It gives you a really good chance to put another sort of message behind you. If you want to be calm, if you want to be country, you want to be business, what is like your style, there's another register you can play with instead of just a plain background. What you should wear in the headshot is business casual right now, because you need to use this kind of for everything, and I think most young businesses now don't require a suit and tie unless you're really applying for some kind of financial institution, which would be unusual for us graphic designers. We're creatives, but it should look still kind of representative. But you could also Google around and see what other people have in that industry that you kind of want to copy and see what matches that. What you should try to avoid are large patterns or lines or buzzy things and colors that could be distracting from your actual face. But business casual, when you Google it, that's what you get as a stock photo kind of a look of these people. So it can be okay with the jeans and the shirt because we are creatives. I think there's no problem with that at all. Then here's some camera tips that I found out. Like usually when people take our photo, we kind of back up, and we because it's like an invasion of our privacy. But by backing up, we're creating this really weird double chin here, as you can see when I go like this. So what some photographer told me is like when you go out, you actually make your leg almost unnaturally come forward so that your face is bigger than the rest of your body. That little bit of a difference sort of gives it more personal look, and it also kind of really avoids and makes like a nicer neck for you to look. So almost extend further than you would think into the camera. One trick here. And another photographer told me that you want to have this spontaneity by, if you like turn around and take that picture in that second where you turn around, even like if you have your hands in your pockets, you can turn around and put them out at that moment, because then you're concentrating on this movement of taking your hands out, but at the same time you're there. But that also takes a lot of pictures to take, which is not a problem with digital anymore. We can take as many as we want, but it just takes a long time to find that right moment. But then you have sort of a more spontaneous smile that's not so like you're not putting your camera face on. That's one technique to avoid that. So here is an example that is not so good with this shadow that I mentioned before as well. When you have the strong shadow coming from the side and it creates a cast behind you, you want to take that out. Or on the bottom here, you can see two differences between a very strong light, like sunlight. It's kind of too harsh on the left for her. On the right, it's softer with studio light, or like a big window in your house. It's actually better to take photos on a cloudy day, then you get a little bit softer light. There's also, this thing with the chin that you want to make sure maybe you have a reflector below that lightens up a little bit below the chin, so it doesn't look like you have some kind of beard hanging here. And there's a technique where you want to have the light coming at the closest to the camera, which could be advisable for people with glasses, because you want to make sure that there are no reflections in the glasses which would hide your eyes, which would not be a good thing. If anything, you can Photoshop that out, but it's better not to even have it in the first place. Or you could do the opposite, where you have the shadow in the front, and it's supposed to give you a thinner face if that's something that you're concerned about. Quite often the photos, the skin tones don't really match what we really want to look like. You need to really find that. It's really hard with the levels, but look in the curves in Photoshop and adjust the levels just to that where you think you have enough contrast in the midtones, but you have highlights too that don't blur out too much, but you also have strong shadows at the same time, so you have a whole range. But in the midtones, it's the hardest to find the right saturation and the right tone of your actual skin, and I think it really represents who you are. So for me, that's also really important. So there's a little video about that in the description. And if you have any good tips as a photographer, some of you are really good photographers, so maybe there's a chance you can take each other's photos, social distancing permitted, and you can write each other and post your photos. We'll go through them in class and give you some advices on how to make them really a good one, because it's just really great to have. You always need it somewhere.